So let's cross to Ireland now. I think Dougie Beattie is there to tell us what's going on.
Have been subject to looting. We have 11 Garda vehicles either destroyed through arson or very extensively destroyed, and also then as the extensive damage as I've set out. So huge destruction from a riotous mob who were in effect responding at our crime scene to try and break into that crime scene and disrupt the crime scene at about 5:30, 6:15, and then from there on the violence escalated. Order was restored in about between 8:30 and 9 o'clock as we deployed more resources. Thank you.
Questions, Paul? Commissioner, did you fail the people of Ireland? Did you fail the country? Those 3 hours last night that you have said, some people would say longer, that you calm up and restored to 11 o'clock last night. Did you fail the people of Ireland by failing to protect the citizens and the city?
No, and Garda Síochána responded to this entirely and in an extraordinary fashion. Members from across the country, not just here in DMR, responded, returned to duty. Public order units from all over Ireland responded here to Dublin. More and more resources were arriving throughout the evening, but we could not have anticipated that in response to a terrible crime, the stabbing of school children and their teacher, that this would be the response. In effect, those filled with hate, and the hate directed towards members of Garda Síochána, that they would attempt to storm through our cordon and disrupt the crime scene, and then engage in violence, looting and disorder, including very significant criminal damage. Nobody could have anticipated that when these events started at 1:30, these awful events. And obviously we were concentrated upon the investigation. We couldn't have anticipated that this would be the reaction.
But people will say, why weren't you monitoring social media, the far-right groups, who you say exacerbated the situation? Why didn't you move quicker when you saw the build-up of tensions, both online and on the streets?
Well, the build-up of tensions, as you describe on social media, we were monitoring those, and we were constantly then adding to our resources that were available in DMR North Central. That was an ongoing part of the operation, and we did respond. But it has to be said that the crowds of those in the first place protesting, filled with hate directed towards members of Garda Síochána, were then supplemented with those who were only intent upon crime, disorder and the looting of premises. And one can see this morning, particularly sports type shops were specifically targeted. Now, Garda reacted quickly to that, and were able to clamp down on that looting, but we responded as the events unfolded. But I don't think at 1:30, as the original events unfolded, or indeed later in the mid-afternoon, we could have anticipated such disorder.
The GRA has said that this is a failure of training, it's a failure of resources, it's a failure of personnel, that these are problems they have spoken about for a long time, and they also say that's clear what happened last night. An attack.
Well, this is not a failure of personnel. All members of Garda Síochána responded to this. Everyone stood up to the plate in terms of their response. I now have to look to the tactics that we have for public order. We have not seen public order situation like this before. This may be behaviour which is apparent in other countries, but I think that we've seen an element of radicalisation. We have seen a group of people who take literally a thimble full of facts and make a bathtub of assumptions, hateful assumptions, and then conduct themselves in a way which is riotous and disruptive to our society. We then have to respond to that in terms of our tactics. And there's no failure here. There's no failure. This is regrettably how protests have moved on, and now we have to graduate and have a proportionate response to that.
But we saw something similar a few weeks ago.
OK, let's leave the Commissioner there and head to Dougie Beattie, who's in Dublin, close to where all this was taking place yesterday. I mean, I don't think you could hear that, but it's interesting that the Commissioner saying, Dougie, there's been no failure here on behalf of the Garda. This is all down to the hate-filled actions of those rioters.
Well, I can see why he's trying to defend that position. And you've got to say, tactically last night, the Garda responded extremely quickly. There's no doubt about that. Their plan to actually squeeze the protesters, which then turned into rioters, into the side streets and take them out of the equation was masterful, to say the least. It was a lesson in how to deal with that sort of riot. I mean, look at behind me now. That's a bus actually sitting there in the back of this trailer. And behind that is the Lewis, the tram, both completely destroyed, burned out, millions of pounds worth of damage done there, and quite a few shops in this area. To say nothing of the reputation of Dublin itself, especially for shopping, Christmas trips, you name it. I mean, it's always seen as a great social place. But where this has failed for Drew Harris, unfortunately, is politically this has been brewing for over a year in Dublin. There has been lots of cries from people saying about the amount of immigrants coming in, especially around young men, young male immigrants, and that is the chant that has been coming here for about the last year. People want stuff done with it. Politically, Dublin is sitting on a coalition government, and it is very hard for that coalition government to make decisions, although it's got to be said, the country is in good shape, and they're making the decisions financially. But when it comes to immigration and trying to walk two roads at once, they find a bit of a problem. So Drew Harris has been caught in the middle of a political storm by not watching what was going on politically, but operationally he's got to be handed and said, look, he did quite well last night.
Yeah, Dougie, I think a lot of people watching and listening will be scratching their heads trying to figure out how one terrible incident, the stabbing that happened outside the school, turned into a riot. Can you explain?
Well, these 5 people were caught in this incident. One of them, we believe, was the perpetrator. The other 4, a woman and 3 children, were stabbed. Now, what happened was that there was an assumption that this man was a foreign national, or at least had been a foreign national. And then when Drew Harris was asked about this, he wouldn't confirm one way or the other, which then started this bubbling that we've been talking about the last year in Dublin, right the way across Ireland, because quite like the rest of Britain, there's massive waiting lists here on doctor surgeries, school places. It's not that they haven't got the infrastructure here. It's the fact that there's too many people for the infrastructure, very like the rest of the UK at this minute in time. So there's a lot of resistance to immigration coming in. So those that used this on social media sparked it off to say that it was because Drew Harris wouldn't confirm or deny. They took it that he was a foreign national, and the protests started down here. Now, Drew has said that they tried to get into the crime scene itself, which is where we were earlier on this morning, and that in itself sparked a clash between the Garda Síochána and the protesters that then turned it into a riot, and the outworking of it is this right now that we're looking at. So it is very complicated, but it's not really any different from what's going on across the whole rest of the UK, and that feeling that the indigenous population feel that they are being trampled over the top of, and they want answers, and politicians not wanting to get involved in the middle of it, and very much leaving it on the plate of the police services